Lee, welcome to our show.
Welcome, Savannah, to our show.
We have seen each other 3 days in a row.
Oh, my.
How does it feel?
Do you need a break?
No, I'm asking if you need a break.
I'm in. I'm all in.
Same.
Yes.
And we're all both in black.
How about that? Ready for the holidays.
Conformity.
Ready for the holiday parties.
Yes. Lee, how did you feel like the No Small Endeavor show out with Sharon McMahon?
I thought we've gotten to do shows since 2008 and these big year-end shows since 2010, and it was among my favorites. It was really special.
Yeah, it felt that way.
Yeah.
It was my first one.
Oh.
I have nothing to compare it to,
well,
but it was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was very, very thankful.
Yeah, good. I'm happy that you feel good. That was really exciting. Okay, so we're going to start on like a low note and then end up. You know what I mean?
Well, we'll see.
We're going to do some of this. So we've been reading reviews at the beginning of every episode, and I've sort of been throwing us, actually, I don't know what the sports reference is, but like throwing an easy ball.
Softballs.
Throwing a softball. I have been throwing softballs, as they say in the sports world, because all of them have been good. And I just wanted to talk about last week's episode or the week before. We talked about two things. Number one, Billie Eilish in her speaking to billionaires. And then we also talked about another viral video that talked about slavery. And we got some pushback on that. And I love that. It's great. And so I just wanted to read a couple of things and maybe us just talk about it.
That sounds good.
Okay, so on slavery. Jake Townley says, hi, Exodus 21:16. Also, I love starting with hi. So I love you, Jake. Okay. Hi, Exodus 21:16 is explicit in condemning slavery by kidnapping. No need for the Ark of Justice conversations, as helpful as they are. Chattel slavery was always a capital offense. So let's just start with that.
Well, as I recollect, the question was, does the Bible universally condemn slavery, right?
Yes, and my hot take was, I don't think it does. And then you said it's actually not that hot of a take.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think so. I didn't know the verse that Jake was referring to, so I actually went back and looked and checked that out. First, I will just note that I didn't check all the translations, but at least like the NIV and the new RSV seem to be more explicitly pointed toward kidnapping generally in that verse.
Yes.
And so, but if you look at the context of Exodus 21 itself, it presumes the practice of slavery. Mm-hmm. It does not condemn the practice of slavery. It gives rules for how one would practice the institution of slavery. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like that chapter makes the point that the Bible does not condemn slavery universally.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really good. And I think in reading this review too, I'm wanting to make sure that it's not coming across as us being like, no, for real, you're wrong. But saying like, yes, this pushback is exactly why we need to be talking about this, because like in this Exodus passage, as you said, like a lot of people might want to use that as like a clobber passage to say like, see, it does condemn chattel slavery. But like what we're trying to say here is not like, no, the Bible for sure says this one thing, but we're trying to say this is a multivocal, as Pete Enns would say, like that the Bible has a lot of voices around this, and that's okay to sit in that tension.
Yeah.
Is that
and I would also want and I would also want to strongly affirm that as I read the whole trajectory of the Bible, I don't see how you can come to any conclusion except to reject slavery across the board. Right. Specifically
with Jesus being the image of God. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
1,000%.
So it's just, so I think that's one of the things that's tricky here is like, again, it points us back to the art of interpretation and the art of how texts operate in our lives and how they have authority in our lives is always mediated through interpretation and through the ways you choose to let this text have authority. You know, if proof texting worked, then life would be so easy. Yeah, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. And even in Philemon, like Paul doesn't say slavery is an institution that we need to get rid of. Like it's not that clear either. And so there are ways that I think that Paul and gospel writers like push back, but it's not even like that explicitly clear to me. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
While also agreeing with the pushback that we got, is that there still is a distinction, it seems to be, between the kind of slavery being practiced in the New Testament and the horrors of chattel slavery that was practiced in the United States.
Yeah. So this guy named Dr. Josh Bowen have you ever heard of him?
Yes, but I don't know why.
He got his PhD from Johns Hopkins in Ancient Near Eastern Studies, I believe. And he wrote this book on slavery in the ancient Near East, in antiquity, and then also specifically in the Hebrew Bible. And he makes the distinction too a little bit, like, because I think a lot of apologists will use that excuse of like, it's not chattel slavery, it was fine, like to almost like dim what was actually happening. And while he doesn't affirm that, he actually says, no, like it wasn't chattel slavery, but it was bad, like what was happening. And he calls it debt slavery. So like if I owe you $10,000 and I can't pay it back, then like I have to become enslaved to
Right.
you in
Yeah.
order to pay it off. And I guess in the Hebrew Bible, what he says is that after 6 years, you had to release all of the people that were like, but that maybe that practice didn't actually happen, so that there was like complexity there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would recommend Dr. Josh Bowen's book was really good. I remember reading it
Yeah.
and enjoying it for
Yeah.
that. But yeah, Jake, thanks for the feedback.
Indeed. Thank
Always
you,
love
Jake.
it. Okay, second bit of feedback about Billie Eilish is from Darren. He says, a quick Google search will show that the billionaires in the room with Billie, however unsavory they may be, have given away more money than she will ever make. When multimillionaires call out billionaires, you know you're in silly land. I love silly land so much. Maybe it's because we just saw Wicked, but silly land feels like it would be in Wicked. Should everyone who has less than $1 million ask Billie why she is a millionaire? All right, Darren.
Thanks,
Love the
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think that I don't know. For me, after I was reading that this morning, I think I have personally known and or do know 5 billionaires.
Bill
Uh-huh.
B.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
And I, without exception, all of them have given away more money than I could ever imagine making in my life.
Yes.
And I think that by and large, what I know of these folks, that they have been very intentional about trying to be generous and good stewards and continue to give away. And it's also, I think, worth noting that a lot of times it's like, even on the one hand, what does it mean to be a billionaire? On paper, and it basically means that at one level, it means that you have control of some sort of business entity,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have $1 billion sitting in a bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's just that you've got ownership of some sort of business entity, and you could give it away altogether if that's what you wanted to do, or you could decide that you're going to make sure that your business entities are run according to fair wages and equity and business practices that are sustainable, so forth and so on, right? And so it's always worth digging in a little bit more and asking what we mean by these categories. And so I'm always much more interested in, with whatever we have at our disposal, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's social capital, whether it's friendships, whatever it is, how are we good stewards of it? How do we use it for the good of the world and the glory of God? And I'm not interested myself in making judgments about other folks, but instead asking, how can we all together do this better?
Yeah.
What do you think about any of that? You're not convinced by something
Oh my
I
God,
said.
Lee, I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I think that that's a beautiful heart response. And I am curious why I am not responding well to it.
I don't know that I would have been happy with that response earlier in my life.
True. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe this is me being young showing. I think there's part of me that I want to dig down, and I've said this before in another episode, but like when people say that when Americans hear illion, it all sounds the same. I've talked to you
When they
about
hear
that
what?
before. Illion. So like million, billion, trillion, all sounds the same to us, so it feels flat. But there's such a big difference between million and billion, and then soon to be trillion, probably with Elon Musk. And I think that while it's so fair, like, yes, Billie Eilish is responsible to be a good steward of her wealth, absolutely, and all this stuff. And I'm so curious about why the defense of billionaires, where that comes from, and why like ordinary citizens get defensive of like wanting to protect when people call out the disproportionate wealth, and wanting people like that who, and I don't know in the case of everyone or your friends or whatever, when I think about like the big billionaires that we all think of, like the Jeff Bezoses, the Mark Zuckerbergs, there is exploitation that also goes on underneath that has allowed for them to have that money. And I think it's a fair criticism to criticize that. And so I think that there's like, yes, like I think of like Melinda Gates. I mean, she's giving away so much money and I love that. And so I'm not saying that there aren't people who aren't generous, but I do still think that it's a fair criticism that we can keep on calling it out.
No, I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, I think what I heard in Darren's critique, it's like, it's easy for those of us who have some sort of, we'll put it in scare quotes, modest American wealth.
Yeah.
To look at the multimillionaires and the billionaires and scoff.
Mm-hmm.
But that can be a form of self-righteousness and self-justification when the very same questions that we want to ask of those folks can be asked of us.
1 zillion%.
Right. And so it's like, it's like, if I'm pointing my fingers and I'm pointing them back at myself.
Yes.
And so maybe fingers need to be pointed. I think a lot of times fingers do need to be pointed, right? But please note that I said any kind of mechanism of power here has to be against exploitation.
Yes.
And for justice and for equity and for fairness. And so I don't know. I think I mentioned him maybe on that episode when I went to interview Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's.
Mm-hmm.
And when he and Jerry had full control of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, they set a policy where the CEO's pay, the top pay in the company, could never exceed 7 times the lowest pay in the company.
Yeah.
And I know that's a beautiful commitment, right? Now, meanwhile, though, they still own the company, and so their net worth was worth a whole lot more than their top 7 times on their pay. But they looked at the situation and they said, okay, we're going to make sure that we source our ingredients in a way that is good for the world, that's good for business practices, that's good for people that don't have access to jobs.
Yes.
And look at our supply chain and plus give away a lot of money. And so it was a whole encompassing sets of questions. Are they millionaires? Yeah, they are. But they've also tried to say, well, this has come to us, so now how do we do something with this in a way that is a true benefit to the world?
Yeah. I agree, and I'm happy. Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm happy you mentioned that. Because I think any criticism void of self-criticism is silly. You're just like being naive at that point. And I'm happy that's what you heard in Darren's question, because what I was hearing in Darren's question was defensiveness of like billionaires, and I was like, that's interesting. But I do hear now what you're saying, which is like, hey, like you can't just point at all of these other people and not like be real with your own self. Yeah, which I 1,000% agree with. So those are our negative reviews. Do you want to start the show?
I'm thankful for those.
Me too. Thanks, Darren and Jay.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
A thrilling intro. Let's start the show. Welcome to the Subtext, where we go beneath the headlines and beyond the obvious. I'm Savannah Locke.
I'm Lee Camp.
If you like what you're doing and want to help us get the show in front of more people, please do us a favor by following and rating it wherever you listen. Leave a review, give us 5 stars, hype us up, or leave constructive criticism.
Indeed.
We love it. If you want to watch full videos, you can find that on YouTube and Spotify. And then lastly, you can follow the show at The Subtext Show. You can follow me at Savannah_Locke and Lee at Lee Camp. He's trying to gain his following up to 10,000 followers by the end of next year.
Bye.
What if we gave a goal to you? I would help you reach it. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, just DM us on Instagram at The Subtext Show. I'm proud of you for not saying DMing me. Lee, yesterday we saw Wicked together.
We did.
With 8 of our friends.
Yes, indeed.
And I would love to just hear how you felt about it.
I think it's a very enjoyable, very entertaining film. Good story.
And you did snooze.
I did, because y'all chose to go to the film on the day after the busiest day of my year.
I will say that was hard. I felt bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a 16-hour work day the day before.
Yeah.
So I wasn't quite on my movie watching game.
You were not.
But it nonetheless mostly kept me awake.
But you showed up.
I showed up and I mostly stayed awake.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, when we were watching the movie, I had my phone out. I was making notes just because I knew we were going to do the episode about things we could talk about. And so I thought we could just go through the list.
Did you take any pictures of me sleeping?
I was so tempted. But to protect the privacy, so the theater was actually full.
Yes.
And
I will say that
I didn't want to take pictures of them.
It reminds me, I was reminded how little I've gone to theaters here lately when I walked in and realized, oh, yes, it's reserved seats and they have these recliners. I'm still not used to that.
The reserved seating is different.
Yeah, it's very different.
But it was totally full because basically at the end of the movie when they were singing For Good, Lee, I was like weeping, like almost uncontrollably. And I look over and you were not. Like it looked to me that you were asleep, maybe not. And I was like, our experience of this movie is very different.
Yes. So how did you like it?
I really liked it. Yeah. I have a lot of things that I would like to talk about in terms of like deeper level stuff. But yeah. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Glinda has this song called Couldn't Be Happier.
Glinda.
Yes. She has this song called Couldn't Be Happier where she basically is talking about how like she's basically gotten all of her dreams. Like she has the guy, she has Fiyero, she has like the magic, she has the wand, she's in charge of all these people, everyone loves her. And she starts singing like I couldn't be happier. Although I admit the tiniest bit unlike I anticipated, but I couldn't be happier. Simply couldn't be happier. Well, not simply, because getting your dreams is strange, but it seems a little, well, complicated. There's kind of a sort of cost. There's a couple of things get lost. There are bridges you cross you didn't know you crossed until you've crossed. And so she's like trying to convince herself in this song of like, I have everything I want. I should be happy. And what that made me think of is what makes a dream fulfilling and what makes a dream unfulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me of some of the stuff I've done in some classes with undergrads. There's this guy at Harvard named Dan Gilbert, who's a psychologist, and he talks a lot about miswanting and how we should not trust our brains to tell us what will make us happy.
Interesting.
And that we predictably miswant what we think will make us happy. And so, for example, he talks about some study. You can find this if you just Google his TED Talk, Dan Gilbert. You'll hear him talking about this particular study. But they did this study, he said, of folks who had very serious accidents and had become paraplegics, and that generally speaking, that about 1 year after the accident, they reported that their happiness levels were roughly what it was prior to the accident. And he said that ought to tell us a lot about our brains. And he points to, he and lots of other researchers on this point to what they call hedonic adaptation. You know, so the idea is that hedonic adaptation is the mechanism by which the emotional effect of some stimulus is attenuated over time.
Attenuated.
Right? Yeah. So we have something.
What does attenuated mean?
So we have something that makes us happy.
Yeah.
And our feelings of happiness spike.
Okay.
And attenuation means those get more minimized.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
They're not as big up and down.
Yeah.
They're more compressed or lessened, reduced. And that this is on the positive side. This allows someone who goes through a horrific accident a year later to still be happy. So it's a very helpful, it's like a psychological immune system, he calls it. But on the other side, what it does is those things that make us happy, those also get attenuated. But what we always tend to think is we're just going to focus upon that moment of happiness that we're going to have when this good thing happens. And inevitably, it's going to go away. And so he talks a lot about learning how to navigate that kind of stuff. And so one, for example, he says is one instance of this is what he calls focalism, where when you think about achieving something that's going to make you happy, you're only focused upon that one little slice of life. Whereas life is full and life has all sorts of other things, right? So you've got a whole lot more stuff's going to be happening in your life than just that one thing. There could be the envy of your friends who envy you now because you had that thing. It could be that your parents have passed. It could be that there's other financial difficulties. It could be that now you have an increased sense of expectation of what you've got to pull off and do because you achieved this thing. So all sorts of other things. So he says, don't just focus on the one thing. Try to have a broader conception of really what's going to happen if you achieve this dream. So all that kind of stuff is fascinating. And obviously it's illustrated beautifully in that passage of Wicked.
That is amazing. I've never heard of that research before. That's not the guy that did the Happiness Project, is it? Is it the same person?
I don't know. You're thinking about, aren't you thinking about Gretchen Rubin?
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's I guess it's similar outcome or not. Yeah, it is similar outcomes actually too, but just similar research. Yeah, I guess for me, I don't know if he talked about this in what you learned, but I was thinking a lot about like attachment to things that we have, and like with Glinda, which now what you're saying, Glinda had like this very small view, I think, and I loved the throwbacks that they had from her childhood of like, oh, this is what it is for me to be like loved and adored and cherished and whatever. But then she didn't have like the broader picture of the cost of that. And I think like, and this is like reading into it, I don't know. I'm not like I don't know enough about Wicked. So I have seen Wicked the play once, and I've seen the movie once, and then this movie once. So I am not like an expert in this, but just my impression when I was watching it was that Glinda thought that what would make her fulfilled and happy was for everyone to love her. And I don't think she realized the cost of that would be that she would not be able to be herself. And so, like, in the childhood throwbacks that they had, you see her being like, I want to keep their attention by being magical. And then through circumstance, like they thought she was magical, even though she wasn't. And she kind of had to keep up that facade and that act in order to be like what she thought would be fulfilled and happy. And I think that for me, when I was like reading through these lyrics and when I watched it, I just felt like, oh, she was attached to, if I am magical, then I will be like loved and fulfilled. Or if I can just get this teacher, the Madam whatever, Morble, to teach me, then I will be fulfilled. And instead, like what actually I think Elphaba gives her in the end of the day is like Elphaba just loving her for her rather than all of the things that she can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of it to me, like what I felt was some of her attachments to these things that if she had just let go, she could have just been her.
Yeah. And the way so many of our attachments are just false, right? Or delusions.
And, doesn't it suck?
You can't, I mean, for example, if your notion is, I'll be happy when everybody likes me, well, first, then you're never going to be happy in the first place because everyone's not going to like you.
But I can try.
You can, you are welcome to try. And get to the end of your life and realize Lee was right. I should have listened to him 40 years ago.
So true.
But alas, I was dogged in wanting everyone to like me.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So, you can attach your sense of happiness to things that can never be accomplished. Well, that's one kind of sad loss. But instead it's trying to figure out, okay, well, where should I place my kind of goals and where should I place my sense of accomplishment?
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts on that? Like what is worth that?
Yeah, I have a lot of I have a lot of thoughts about it. I mean, for me, theologically, I think of it theologically. A lot of people don't even think you should. I think, at least anecdotally, a lot of people feel uncomfortable if you ever say anything about happiness with regard to theological pursuits, as if you wanting to be happy makes you shallow and somehow not spiritual or something, which I think is garbage. Everybody wants to be happy. And a lot of the Christian tradition has said, no, this is what life is about. It's us also learning to be happy. And as I put it with my students, about pursuing a rightfully defined happiness. That's the trick, is can you define happiness in a way that's rightfully defined? And if so, then pursue it with everything you've got. As a matter of fact, to pursue it may be synonymous with the pursuit of friendship with God, which is, what a lot of people have said. So yeah, I think about that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like there is some fear in some religious circles around pursuing something that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Like feel happy. And I think that there are, I don't know, maybe toxic forms of happiness or whatever, or like just misguided forms of happiness, like to your point, that are shallow and empty at the end.
Yeah.
But I think that there is something too of like just like satisfaction. Like I've certainly had moments in my life where I look around and I'm like, oh, yeah, like this is good.
Yeah.
Like this is good and I feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to think about what happiness entails, but two major ways of thinking about happiness. One is, as you were just pointing to, this notion that happiness is to be located where we have a certain set of feelings that are activated in us. That we have pleasure, or we have high dopamine levels, or whatever the case, and therefore we are quote unquote happy. And then there are others who, if you look in the virtue traditions, Aquinas, Aristotle, and all those kind of guys, they would say one is happy to the degree that one is good, and that happiness comes from goodness. They're always correlated together. And so as you grow in goodness, you will grow in happiness. Now, that doesn't mean, right, that everything's always going to be quote unquote happy for you, because growth in goodness often comes out of difficulty and hardship and challenge. But nonetheless, as you pursue courage, or as you work in endurance, or you work to develop becoming a more loving human being, then there's a different kind of happiness and joy that comes from that.
Yeah.
So those are at least two different ways to think about happiness. And I think on the front end of our lives, earlier we can get clear about what we mean by happiness. And my vote's always going to be for the second kind.
The good.
Yeah.
Then
it can help us avoid a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting, like, I think Glinda actually goes on that journey.
Yeah.
During the movie.
Yeah. That's the subtitle of the second movie.
For good.
For good. Wicked for good.
Where I was just weeping.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about propaganda next.
Yes.
Okay, so there's this scene where Elphaba, after she finds out that the wizard's a fraud, right? And she's like, I've got to let the people of Oz know that he's lying. She goes into the clouds and she writes in the clouds, our wizard lies. But then Madame Morrible changes it while everyone's like in a panic to Oz dies. So she switches what the people see and make Elphaba into even more the Wicked Witch of the West, like the enemy, right? And this got me thinking about propaganda. It got me thinking about like changing history, which, I mean, literally, why does everything go back to Orwell for me lately? I just reread Animal Farm yesterday or 2 days ago because I'm just like so like enamored with this at the moment. But just how like in Animal Farm, when the animals revolt against the farmer, they start their own world. The pigs end up being at the top of the pecking order. And then they create this set of like 5 rules, right? And then over time, these rules change in the middle of the night and the other animals come in and they see the new rules and they're like, wait a second, I thought that it originally said that and it must have just not. Like, it must have always been this way. And it got me thinking, too, about, like, how powerful changing the written word could be. The same goes for 1984, too. Like, they would go in and basically where the country that they lived in, wow, which now I've forgotten, but basically whenever they were either at war with the East or with the West. And whenever they would be at war with the West, then all of the history books would change to be that they've always been at war with the West. And whenever they would be at war with the East, then the history books would all be changed to say that they would all been at war with the East. So that's what that got me thinking of.
Yeah. No, I mean, in my mind, that's what this movie is best at, is getting us to think about the stories that are told in public and the way there's an agenda behind the stories that are being told in public.
Nice. Say more.
And that people with power are always wanting to control the narrative and always wanting to control the spin. And so it's this great classic case study, fictional, obviously, but it's this great case study of saying, yeah, that's happening all the time and don't get sucked in. And, you don't want to be the poor saps who have big smiles on their face in the public square rejoicing at the burning of the Wicked Witch of the West. You've just shown that you've been duped.
Yeah.
Right. And so over and over and over again, the film invites us to say, dig in, see what more is going on behind the scenes, see who's twisting things, try to figure out who's lying, try to figure out who's telling the truth. And it was probably not as simple as you think it is. Keep digging in, keep digging in, keep digging in. And as you said, the control of history is crucial.
So crucial.
And, when I was an undergrad, I was this naive, STEM person who thought, why should I have to be wasting my time taking a history class? It's a waste of my time to take history. Let's be practical. Let's do stuff that matters in the present. And only when I was in seminary did I realize how stupid I was about that, right? Because what's going on in history is there's a lot of stuff going on in history, but one of the things that's going on is it's shaping our perceptions of who the heroes and the victims are, or the villains are. It's shaping our own sense of self-righteousness of our people and the things that we've done and the wars that we've fought. And that it's crucial to keep digging in around that kind of stuff. And once you begin to realize that, then you know why these academics get so worked up about things that other people think is stupid to be arguing about and fussing about, right? But I'll say right now, and maybe wandering into territory I shouldn't wander into right here, but it's like I've been in academics, I've been in higher education, counting my graduate school days, and then as a professor for 31 years, and I have never had the sense of control over the words that get used in a classroom than right now at this time in my life history. And we're like literally being told words you cannot use in syllabi.
Yeah.
And it ticks me off, right? Because it's like all of a sudden, all of this control in the name of liberty is saying, no, you can't say that word. You just can't say that word.
Yeah.
And if you use those words, then you're threatening federal funding to your institution. And so, all of that propaganda stuff is powerful, and we've got to learn to pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah, I love that you talked about your own personal experience because it's affecting you. And I think what it shows us and what it shows me in the movie, too, is that people who are afraid of history and are afraid of the truth are afraid of losing control.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important for us to recognize when we look around every bit of news we're taking in, social media, everything is being shaped in some way. And it's just important to be critical thinkers about it.
Yeah. And that it's a very long-standing tradition of authoritarian types to try to control what books you read and try to control what stories you know or what stories you repeat. And it's a key practice of being human, of having the courage to dig in and say, well, what's really going on here? And why is there so much anxiety about this story being told or that story being told?
Yeah, because probably those stories have power.
Yeah.
And they're worth being told, which is the wildest part. Okay, well, speaking of truth tellers, to me, that feels like Elphaba in the whole film, in part 1 and part 2. And I thought theologically, if I was viewing the movie theologically, she to me feels like the prophet of the film. I read Richard Rohr's The Tears of Things earlier this year, which is where he goes through all of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible and basically talks about, he traces the prophetic tradition as a journey from anger to sadness and then compassion. And so that's why The Tears of Things, that's where they're
Got it.
Great title, Richard. Great title. And so in the book, he argues that it's people that are on the edge of society that are better positioned to see injustice, and that true prophets emerge from the positions of disadvantage. And it reminded me of Elphaba in the whole film. She kind of came in from the edges and was able to see much more clearly than people like Glinda who were in the center, that I think she just didn't see a lot of it because she was being propped up by a lot of it. Whereas Elphaba comes in kind of as this prophet who is a truth teller, which is ultimately why she also got ostracized, which happened to a lot of prophets.
Yeah. I don't know about
The Tears of Things.
Well, I'll say I don't know if I want to make the presumption that all the prophets are going to come from the margins, but certainly a whole lot of them do.
Yes.
I was thinking immediately the prophet Amos, 8th century BC. He's framed in there as he goes up to the northern kingdom of Israel and does his prophetic indictment of the injustices of the structures and the systems there, and he specifically puts himself as, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. That is, in other words, he's saying, I didn't go to seminary. My daddy didn't go to seminary. I'm not a professional pastor. But I just came. The Lord called me from trimming the fig trees, and called me up here to say what I've got to say. And so it is very often those who, come from outside that can see things so very clearly. And yeah, I think you see that in a lovely way here. And I think I think I would speculate one of the obvious reasons that's often the case is because people who have experienced some sort of sense of marginalization are more sensitive to see mechanisms of injustice, right? And so that that does require, I think, working through those steps you said Roar specifies, right? First, the anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is whether or not it can become an anger that gets directed in some sort of constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
And then anger that resolves into some sadness. And then sadness that
To compassion. Yeah.
that moves us to compassion. So yeah, I think that's generally that could be a helpful kind of way of thinking about all of that.
Yeah. I also, to be clear, don't think that Richard Rohr was like the only prophets come from that. I think he was just mainly saying their prophets are better positioned on the outside, meaning people who are on the inside sometimes are too comfortable to see the injustices and mechanisms of injustice in their own system.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think he would say that there are no, whatever, because he himself is not.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Nessa. Such a complicated character.
Yes.
Remind
people
remind people, aka remind you
people
who Nessa is.
He's like,
who is Nessa?
I remembered.
So when Nessa becomes governor,
we should have given a what do you call that thing? A spoiler alert at the beginning of this episode.
Well, the whole thing's on Wicked, so to me, if you're listening, you're ready to get in.
If you're listening, you're already screwed. If
and it's been a play for like a zillion years, so we're all in. Okay, so when Nessa becomes governor, she signs a law into place that is against animals because what she says is that she was terrified of being associated with Elphaba. And that was really fascinating to me because she, I think, displayed really well the cost of like an in-group, out-group mentality, like a really binary mentality. But then also to me, it goes back to something Sharon McMahon was talking about at the live show. Do you remember that conversation?
Remind me.
Where she talks about consensus building.
Yeah, and finding whatever space of agreement you can find.
Yes.
And lean into whatever the smallest space of agreement you can find is. Yeah, and begin there.
To agree on as much as you can with people on opposite sides of the aisle.
Right.
Because otherwise it leads to total polarization. Yeah. And I think that what we saw with Nessa signing that into, and she obviously was on her own journey, but Nessa signing that into law and then ultimately being against the Munchkins too, is because of her not wanting to be associated with, like guilt by association.
Yeah.
Where else do you see that at play?
Oh, goodness. I mean, that was huge in the church tradition in which I was raised.
You're kidding.
Oh, no. I mean, it was like if you, went to the church where so-and-so preached, or you were on a lectureship panel with so-and-so, or had any friendship with so-and-so who had already been determined to be a heretic, then you, by definition, were a heretic because of the definition. And so I've seen that ever since I was a little kid. And obviously it works not only in church context, but in political context and social context. It's all over the place.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then a counter to that I had to recently think through, like in the last couple of years, I was invited to lead worship at an event with someone who was alleged to have covered up abuse at his church. And for me, it was the first time that I had to think, am I comfortable being part of an event with someone who has allegedly done this, right? And in that, I guess, when you were just talking, I was like, oh, that's another form of guilt by association where I was like aware of not just the perception, but also my own, it could look perceived support for this person. Have you ever dealt with something like that? Like what would be your process in that?
I have, but at the moment I cannot think of any specific examples.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking as you were saying that is that, I have for a long time thought, I was raised in a very conservative in every form of conservatism, politically, socially, theologically. Mm-hmm. I was raised in that world. And then once I began getting more exposure to left, people on the so-called left or liberal, in all of those categories of liberalism, what I realized was how similar they were in terms of the way in which mechanisms of shame worked. They had completely different convictions about ideas and issues, but the mechanisms of shame, the mechanisms of guilt by association, the sort of political correctness that's assumed on both sides, right? And I think it's ridiculous that people on the right act like it's only the people on the left that impose political correctness. As I was just saying a minute ago, this is it's obviously idiotically false. But the mechanisms of controlling the in-group versus the out-group, it seems to me is exactly the same.
It does feel the same, and it is a shame-driven thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, too, like, for me, I ended up asking questions of the organizers of this thing. I asked several friends what their, like, discernment would be. And then when I realized that I was not going to be leading worship right before they were speaking or something, like they were on a totally different day, I decided to do it. And that was like the right choice for me at the time with what I had or whatever. But I could imagine a different scenario. I could make a different decision. Yeah. And so I think that there's some wisdom involved in that piece too. But the shame being the driver, never a good ending place to that.
Yeah. And I would want to reiterate too that prudence is always necessary, right? And you still have to keep being wise about
prudence, courage, temperance, justice.
That's
faith,
good.
Hope, and love.
That's good, Savannah.
Oh my God, I'm learning.
Memorized.
I'm learning. It's happening. Okay, let's keep the ball rolling with Nessa. Nessa and Bach. Do you remember their love story?
I do remember
their
so-called love story. It was never a love story.
Is that not so sad? Okay, did you know that Bach in real life is Ariana Grande's person?
Her person?
I can't remember if they're married or not.
Oh, okay.
Give me a second. But yeah, so Bach is Ethan Slater, and Ethan Slater and Ariana Grande are together.
Interesting. No, I did not know that.
They are not married, but they're together.
Okay.
So, all that to say, Nessa and Bach's relationship got me thinking about the value of consent. Like, if you take away the freedom for someone to leave, then there's not really the ability for, like, true love to happen. And then that got me thinking about God. What do you think about that?
What do you think about God? Well, yeah. There you go.
Well, but like, okay, so like in my growing up in my tradition, which was like more conservative, and then when I became like an adult Christian, like when I really knew what I was thinking and that I was really agreeing to this whole situation, it was in a Reformed tradition, which is very heavy on this predestination idea, which is like, God chose you and you were in, and there's nothing you can do about it, which sounds great, right? Where you're like, God chose me. But then you realize like, oh, like I don't have a choice in this. like I don't have the freedom to leave. And I think that ultimately became suffocating and maybe ultimately reject a lot of the Reformed tradition. And so that's what it got me thinking about on a more broad level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm.
Are you into predestination?
I am definitely not from that tradition.
Is Church of Christ, what does it lean into when it comes to that? Like freedom of choice and human will? And
very, very strongly against it.
Okay.
Yeah. And obviously maybe to some degrees to a pain and a difficulty. But as David Bentley Hart has me thinking about in his book, That All Shall Be Saved, that if you define freedom ultimately as freedom to do whatever you want, well, that's really an unhelpful definition of freedom. That ultimately freedom, theologically and philosophically, is the capacity to do what one ought, to do what is truly good. And so it doesn't really make sense to think of a desire or an action of rejecting what is truly in one's own best interests as free. But nonetheless, it seems that we're often given this capacity to do so. But anyway, yeah, so that opens up all sorts of interesting things.
It does. I'm so happy you're reading that book.
Yeah.
I love him. He has a really great translation of the Bible.
I just purchased that. It just came in the mail this week.
Yes, would highly recommend to all the people. It's brilliant.
All right. So we need to close up here, Savannah. So let me just ask you this: what are your takeaways on what each of the women, the two main women characters, bring to the table? What do they give each other, you think?
Well, okay. I looked on social media after we watched the film to see who people liked. Like, I was just curious if people had strong opinions about either of them. I had an instinct that everyone would love Elphaba, which makes sense. But I was curious if people had complicated feelings around Glinda, and they do. And so I was thinking through this a lot. Like, what gift did Glinda give to Elphaba? And for me, I think she gives Elphaba confidence, which I thought is great. Like, I think that Glinda used the social capital that she had, and her motives were murky, but she used the social capital she had to, like, invite Elphaba into this world of being kind of, like, more accepted and not being as much on the outside, like, through that dancing scene. I don't know if you were awake for that, but it was really good. It was really good. And I think, too, that Glinda... This is not going to be surprising to you. I relate to Glinda a lot. I think I don't feel I'm one of 5 children, and I think because of that, the self-centeredness piece, like, we didn't have the luxury really of being like I was always one of many, and I think that was a gift of being one of 5 kids. So I don't necessarily relate to that piece as much, but I really relate to the piece of, like, wanting to make people happy and, like, wanting to, like, just make people okay. And I think that the purity of that motive, and then also feeling she had to perform for love. So I think that there's a tenderness to Glinda that people don't necessarily see. That being said, I think a gift that Glinda gave because of that is teaching her to trust someone else. Like, I think that Glinda is naturally, like, she was naturally social. Like, she always was around people and having to trust and build connections and relationships. And that's something that Elphaba without Glinda would not have done. I think that Elphaba would have, like, ended up in the woods by herself doing whatever without Glinda teaching her to trust. My last gift is flexibility. I think that Glinda gives Elphaba the gift of flexibility, of learning to be flexible and adaptable. With Glinda even being like, can I call you Elfie? Like, there's something to that of just being flexible around, like, sure, like, yes, like, I'll learn this, like, new way of relating to someone and, like, new way of being, like, close to someone. But yeah, what do you think about those takeaways?
No, I like all those takeaways.
Yeah.
I especially like the, just the fact that we're all complicated, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, and you know, even like with some of the things that we've talked about in this episode, one of the things I was running in another spin in my head as you were talking was, I don't even know that I agree with all the things that I have said in this episode.
Always.
You know, and it's like, we're all always complicated. And I think that the more that we can approach one another without presumption and with goodwill and looking for the best in one another, the better. And so I think that's a great
It's a charitable view of Glinda.
Yeah, that's right.
Because a lot of people were critical of her and being like, she's such a bad person and whatever. And I'm sure, like, she's definitely shallow and self-centered. I think she grows in that, like, to not be so. And she develops a lot of courage. But, like, I don't know. I just had a lot of compassion for her. On the counter side, Elphaba, which is so obvious. Like, I think Elphaba is such a good, like, moral compass in general. So I think she teaches Glinda moral courage. I think Glinda was only out for herself. And, like, self-survival and self-protection. And I think that she wanted to make sure her world was okay. And I think she wanted to make sure that other people loved her and that was complicated. But I think that what Elphaba gave her was this sense of, like, hey, even if everyone else rejects you, like, you can still love you and be, like, good with you. And I think that's the gift that Elphaba gives to Glinda. And then I also think that she gives her the gift of empathy, like, learning. I don't think Glinda had ever occurred to her that the suffering of other people mattered. Because she was so wrapped up in her own world. And I think Elphaba teaches her that, like, why that matters and why all of our suffering is wrapped up in each other, which I think is good, like some collectivism. And then lastly, I think that Elphaba, and this is more reading into it, and I would be curious, honestly, to hear Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, and if they agree with this. I think that Elphaba gives Glinda a place to be loved without her having to be on. Like, I don't think that Elphaba loved Glinda because she was performing. I think that she loved Glinda for who she, like, truly was before Glinda even saw that in herself. But that's reading into it more. Yeah.
I think all of those are great. I can see all that. It does lead me to ask one question, though, and that is, there's I don't remember. I think I learned this from Michael McRae, who's one of my former students, who's done a lot of interesting stuff in conflict management. But he talks about, and I don't know where he gets it from, but he talks about how a lot of times in situations of social conflict, high stakes social conflict, that there's this need for the so-called perfect victim. And it's almost as if you can't really give your heart and resources and help to a victim unless they're the perfect victim. That is the absence of any fault on their own part.
Right.
And I almost wonder if the movie makers don't make Elphaba a perfect victim.
Yeah.
And
she's so complicated.
Yeah, but yeah. And is she? Or is she sufficiently complicated, you think?
Go on.
I mean, it seems like on the whole, she's a completely admirable character all the way through.
This is good. She feels complicated to me because I don't know that she should have. I know that she was trying to help who would become the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, for example. To me, that feels complicated because it was almost like you didn't need to try to control that scenario, even though it was out of the goodness of her heart.
Yeah.
But I do agree that she internally, like even then, her motive was good.
Right. There's no character flaws exhibited in her storyline that I remember. That I remember either.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is, as you said, there's this contingent failing because she couldn't foresee all that needed to be foreseen.
Yeah.
But that's not a moral failing.
It's not a moral failing. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. Yeah, she was the most grounded character in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Lee, great take at the end. It's like
pulled
whenever
me through in the end.
So true. No, it's like whenever like I go to therapy or whatever, and at the very, very end, I'll be like, oh, and by the way, and like drop a big bomb and then leave. And there's actually a thing for that. Like therapists say people do this all the time where they'll like go 50 minutes and then be like, by the way, that's what you just did. And we will close the door on that.
Thanks for this therapy session.
You're welcome.